The stars looked different today. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiant and watched the distant lights through the main viewing screen. Something felt wrong, but he could not say what it was. The ship moved through space at normal speed while the crew did their daily work. Jake had been in space for 15 years, and he knew when things were not right. Lieutenant Amy Brooks sat at her station and watched the radar screens. Her fingers moved across the controls as she checked for any signs of danger. The space around them looked empty, but Amy always stayed alert. She had learned long ago that empty space could hide many secrets. Her job was to keep the ship safe from any threats that might come their way. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh worked in the engine room below the bridge. The engines hummed with power, and everything seemed normal. Danny loved his job and took care of the ship like it was his own child. He knew every sound the engines made and could tell when something was wrong just by listening. Today the engines sounded good, but Danny felt worried about something he could not explain. The USS Defiant was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was fast and strong. Jake and his crew had been on patrol for 3 months. They were supposed to check the outer edges of human space and make sure no enemies were coming. It was usually a quiet job, but today felt different. The crew could sense something was about to happen. Amy looked up from her screen with a worried face. She had found something on the long-range sensors that made no sense. The readings showed ships moving toward them, but they were not like any human ships she had ever seen. These ships were bigger and moved in ways that seemed impossible. They appeared to bend space around them as they traveled. Jake walked over to Amy's station and looked at the screen. The ships were still far away, but they were getting closer fast. There were dozens of them, and they moved in perfect formation. Jake had never seen anything like them before. He called Danny on the communication system and told him to get ready for possible trouble. The alien ships came closer, and Jake could see them clearly now. They were beautiful in a scary way. The ships looked like they were made of crystal, and light seemed to flow around them like water. They were much bigger than any human ship, and they moved without making any sound that the sensors could detect. Jake knew these were not human ships, and that meant big trouble. Admiral Kate Sullivan was on Earth when she got the emergency message from the USS Defiant. She sat in her office at the Space Command Center and watched the live video feed from Jake's ship. The alien ships filled the screen, and Kate felt her heart sink. In all her years as a military leader, she had never seen anything like this. These ships were clearly built by a race that was much more advanced than humans. The alien ships stopped moving when they were close enough to the USS Defiant. Jake waited for them to do something, but they just stayed there in space. The silence was scary, and the whole crew felt nervous. Amy kept watching her screens, and Danny made sure the engines were ready to run if they needed to escape quickly. Then, the aliens spoke. Their voice came through the communication system and filled the bridge of the USS Defiant. The voice was cold and sounded like it came from a machine. It spoke in perfect English, which surprised everyone on the bridge. The aliens had been watching humans for a long time, and they knew how to talk to them. The alien voice said they were called the Vexthara, and they had come to claim this part of space for their empire. They said humans were a young race that had spread too far from their home world. The Vexthara had decided that humans needed to learn their place in the galaxy. The voice was calm, but everyone could hear the threat in the words. Jake tried to talk to the aliens, but they did not want to listen. They said humans had 7 days to leave all their colonies and return to Earth. Any humans who stayed would be destroyed along with their ships and buildings. The Vexthara made it clear that they did not care what humans wanted. They had the power to make humans obey, and that was all that mattered. To show their power, the Vexthara attacked 3 humans. warships that were nearby. The alien weapons were like nothing humans had ever seen. Beams of energy came from the crystal ships and went right through the human shields like they were not even there. The human ships exploded in bright flashes of light, and then there was nothing left but floating pieces of metal. Jake and his crew watched in horror as the 3 ships were destroyed. Those ships had been some of the most advanced in the human fleet, and they had been destroyed in seconds. The Vexthara had shown that human weapons and shields were useless against their technology. It was clear that humans could not win a fight. Against these aliens, the alien voice spoke again and said this was just a small example of their power. They had thousands of ships and weapons that could destroy entire planets. Humans had 7 days to decide if they wanted to live as servants or die as rebels. The choice was theirs, but the Vexthara would get what they wanted either way. Jake looked at his crew and saw fear in their eyes. Amy was still watching her screens, but her hands were shaking. Danny had come up from the engine room and stood quietly beside Jake. They all knew that everything had changed in just a few minutes. The human race was now facing the biggest threat in their history, and no one knew how to stop it. The emergency meeting room on Earth was full of worried faces. President Lisa Carter sat at the head of the long table and looked at the military leaders around her. The news from space had reached Earth quickly, and everyone knew that humanity was in serious trouble. The Vexthara had given them 7 days to surrender, and no one had any good ideas about how to fight back. General, Rick Harper stood up and pointed to the star map on the wall. He had been thinking about using the secret weapons that Earth kept hidden on various planets. These weapons were very powerful and had been built to fight other human enemies. But Harper knew in his heart that even the most powerful human weapons would not work against the Vexthara ships. Admiral, Kate Sullivan shook her head when Harper finished talking. She had seen the alien ships destroy 3 warships in seconds. The human shields had been useless, and the weapons had not even scratched the alien ships. She told the room that conventional weapons would be like throwing rocks at armored tanks. The aliens were simply too advanced for human military technology. Dr. Simon Blake sat quietly in the corner and listened to the discussions. He was a scientist who studied alien life forms, and he had been analyzing the Vexthara communications since the first contact. Something about the alien messages had caught his attention, but he was not sure what it meant. He asked for permission to speak, and President Carter nodded her head. Blake stood up and walked to the front of the room. He had found something interesting in the way the aliens spoke and moved. The Vexthara had never mentioned coming down to planet surfaces. They always talked about space battles and orbital bombardments. Blake thought this might be important, but he was not sure why. The scientist explained that he had been studying the alien ship designs and noticed something strange. The ships were built for zero-gravity environments and had very advanced systems to protect the crew from the vacuum of space. But there was nothing in the ship designs that suggested they were meant to land on planets with atmospheres and gravity. Blake pulled up images of the alien ships on the main screen. He pointed out that the ships had no landing gear and no systems for dealing with atmospheric entry. The aliens seemed to do everything from space and never came down to planetary surfaces. This was very different from human ships, which were designed to work both in space and on planets. President Carter asked Blake what this meant for humanity. The scientist said he thought the aliens might have evolved on a world with very low gravity and thin atmosphere. Their technology was designed to make up for their physical weaknesses in space. But what would happen if they were forced to fight on a planet with heavy gravity and thick atmosphere like Earth? Admiral Sullivan became interested in Blake's ideas. She asked if he thought the aliens might be vulnerable on planetary surfaces. Blake said he was not sure, but it was worth investigating. The aliens had never shown any interest in coming down to planets, and this might be because they could not handle the conditions. The room became quiet as everyone thought about Blake's theory. General Harper asked how they could test this idea. The aliens were staying in space and had no reason to come down to Earth. They could destroy the planet from orbit without ever landing. Blake admitted this was a problem, but maybe there was a way to trick the aliens into coming down. Commander. Jake Morrison had returned to Earth after his encounter with the Vexthara. He was in the meeting room and had been listening to the discussions. Jake had an idea that might work, but it would be very dangerous. He stood up and asked permission to speak. Jake explained that the aliens needed certain materials to keep their ships working. These materials were rare in space, but common on planets. If the aliens thought Earth had large amounts of these materials, they might be willing to come down and get them. The key would be making the aliens believe the materials could only be mined from the planet's surface. Lieutenant Amy Brooks was also in the meeting, and she had been working with the communication systems. She said she could create fake signals that would make it look like Earth had huge amounts of the materials the aliens needed. The signals would have to be very convincing, because the aliens were much smarter than humans. Communications officer Paul Evans joined the discussion and said he could help Amy with the fake signals. He had studied the alien communication systems and knew how to make the signals look real. The plan would require precise timing and perfect coordination, but it might work. Dr. Blake was excited about the plan, but he warned everyone about the risks. If the aliens came down to Earth and were not affected by the gravity and atmosphere, then humanity would be in even worse trouble. The aliens would be on the planet's surface with their advanced weapons, and humans would have no way to escape. President Carter looked around the room at all the worried faces. She knew the plan was dangerous, but it might be the only chance humanity had. The conventional military approach would not work against the alien technology. Sometimes desperate times required desperate measures. Admiral Sullivan agreed to support the plan. She would coordinate with the space forces to make sure the fake signals were sent at the right time. The aliens would have to believe that Earth contained the materials they needed, and that these materials could only be obtained by landing on the planet. General Harper was not happy with the plan, but he agreed to prepare ground forces just in case. If the aliens did come down to Earth, then human soldiers would have to be ready to fight them. The general did not know how effective human weapons would be against aliens, but he would prepare his troops for battle. The meeting ended with everyone agreeing to try the plan. They had 6 days left before the Vexthara deadline. Jake and his crew would go back to space to help coordinate the deception. Amy and Paul would work on creating the fake signals. Dr. Blake would continue studying the aliens to learn more about their weaknesses. President Carter stood up and looked at everyone in the room. She said that the fate of humanity was now in their hands. The plan might work or it might fail, but they had to try. The alternative was surrender and slavery to an alien empire. Everyone in the room knew that failure was not an option. The fake signals began broadcasting from Earth 3 days before the Vexthara deadline. Amy Brooks and Paul Evans had worked without sleep to create the perfect deception. The signals made it look like Earth's core contained massive amounts of the rare crystals that the aliens needed for their ships. The signals were carefully designed to match the alien technology and would be very hard to detect as false. The Vexthara received the signals and became very interested. Their ships moved closer to Earth and began scanning the planet with their advanced sensors. The aliens had been in space for a long time, and their ships needed the rare crystals to keep working properly. The signals from Earth suggested there were more crystals on this one planet than they had found in the last 100 years. Commander Jake Morrison watched the alien ships from the USS Defiant. The ships were moving in patterns that suggested they were very excited about something. Jake hoped the deception was working, But he was also worried about what would happen if the aliens discovered the truth. The plan was risky and could make things much worse for humanity. The alien commander sent a message to the human ships. The Vexthara had decided they needed to extract the crystals from Earth before they destroyed the planet. The crystals were too valuable to lose, and their empire needed them badly. The aliens said they would send mining teams to the planet's surface to gather the crystals before the final attack. Dr. Simon Blake was monitoring the alien communications from his laboratory on Earth. He was excited to hear that the aliens were planning to come down to the planet. This would be the first time in recorded history that the Vexthara had left their ships to work on a planetary surface. Blake hoped his theory about their physical weaknesses was correct. The first alien shuttles began descending toward Earth 2 days before the deadline. Captain Betty Ross was stationed in the Nevada desert with a team of human soldiers. They watched from hidden positions as the strange crystal ships came down from the sky. The ships landed awkwardly and seemed to have trouble with the landing process. The alien shuttles were beautiful, but they were clearly not designed for planetary landings. The ships had no proper landing gear and had to use their anti-gravity systems to hover just above the ground. This took a lot of energy, and the ships seemed to struggle with the planet's gravity field. The aliens came out of their ships wearing environmental suits that covered their entire bodies. Captain Ross watched through binoculars as the first Vexthara stepped onto Earth soil. The alien immediately stumbled and fell to the ground. It tried to stand up, but seemed to have trouble with the gravity. The other aliens had similar problems and moved very slowly and carefully. The environmental suits were clearly designed for space environments. They were bulky and awkward and made it hard for the aliens to move. The suits had systems to protect the aliens from the vacuum of space, but they were not designed for planetary atmospheres. The aliens moved like they were underwater and seemed to struggle with every step. Captain Ross used her radio to report what she was seeing to the military commanders. The aliens were having serious problems with Earth's gravity and atmosphere. They could barely walk, and their movements were slow and clumsy. The environmental suits seemed to be malfunctioning, and several aliens had to return to their ships. Colonel Alex Turner was coordinating resistance cells around the world. He had received Ross's report and was spreading the information to human forces everywhere. The aliens were vulnerable on the planet's surface, and this was humanity's chance to fight back. Turner began organizing attacks on the alien landing sites. The Vexthara mining equipment was as advanced as their ships, but it was also designed for zero-gravity environments. The machines kept breaking down in Earth's atmosphere, and the aliens could not repair them quickly. The thick air interfered with their energy systems, and the heavy gravity made their tools work poorly. Dr. Maria Santos was working with the Military Science Division to understand the alien weaknesses. She had studied the reports from the landing sites and realized that the aliens were in serious trouble. Their technology was amazing in space, but almost useless on planetary surfaces. The environmental suits were failing, and the aliens were getting sick from exposure to Earth's atmosphere. The first human attack came at dawn on the second day. A team of soldiers led by Sergeant Linda Hayes approached an alien mining site in the Rocky Mountains. The aliens were struggling with their equipment and did not notice the humans until it was too late. The soldiers used simple projectile weapons, and the aliens could not move fast enough to avoid them. The alien environmental suits were punctured by the human bullets, and the aliens inside began to panic. They tried to return to their ships, but the heavy gravity made it impossible to run. Several aliens collapsed and could not get back up. The surviving aliens called for help, but their communications were being disrupted by Earth's atmosphere. Of the successful attack spread quickly to human forces around the world. The aliens were not invincible on planetary surfaces. Their advanced technology was failing, and they were physically unable to cope with Earth's environment. Human soldiers who had been afraid of the aliens now realized they had a chance to fight. Back, the Vexthara commanders in orbit were receiving distress calls from their ground teams. The landing parties were reporting equipment failures and casualties. The planet's environment was more hostile than they had expected, and their forces were in trouble. The commanders had to decide whether to send more forces down or abandon. The mining operation. Private Ryan Cole was a young soldier from Montana who had volunteered for the dangerous mission of attacking alien positions. He led a small team that discovered something important about the alien breathing systems. The environmental suits were designed to filter out harmful gases in space, but they could not handle Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. The aliens were basically poisoning themselves by breathing Earth's air. The discovery about the breathing systems changed everything. Human forces began targeting the alien air systems instead of trying to destroy the suits completely. When the air systems failed, the aliens would pass out quickly and could be captured easily. This was much easier than trying to kill the aliens with bullets. Jake Morrison received reports from the ground forces and realized the plan was working better than anyone had hoped. The aliens were not just vulnerable on Earth's surface, they were almost helpless. Their entire civilization was based on living in space, and they had no experience with planetary environments. Earth's gravity and atmosphere were like poison to them. The Vexthara ground forces were retreating to there. Ships, but many aliens were too weak to make the journey. The environmental suits were failing everywhere, and the aliens were collapsing from exhaustion. The mining operation was a complete failure, and the alien commanders had learned that humans were much more dangerous than they had thought. Amy Brooks was monitoring the alien communications and heard the panic in their voices. The ground teams were begging to be rescued, and the ship commanders were arguing about what to do next. The aliens had never faced this kind of situation before, and they did not know how to handle it. A perfect deception had turned into a perfect trap. War Commander Zeth Kalan was the most powerful military leader in the Vexthara Empire. He had conquered dozens of star systems and had never lost a battle. When he heard about the problems on Earth, he decided to come down himself with a massive force. Zeth Kalan believed that the ground teams had failed because they were not strong enough. He would show these primitive humans what real Vexthara warriors could do. The War Commander brought 50 of the largest alien ships to Earth's orbit. Each ship carried hundreds of warriors and the most advanced weapons in the Vexthara arsenal. Zeth Kalan planned to land near the human city of New York and establish a permanent base of operations. From there, he would crush all human resistance and complete the conquest of Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from her command center as the alien fleet approached Earth. The ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built, and they carried enough firepower to destroy entire continents. Sullivan knew that if the aliens established a ground base near New York, then millions of people would die. She ordered all available human forces to prepare for the biggest battle in human history. The alien landing began at dawn. Hundreds of ships descended from orbit and filled the sky above New York. The ships were so large that they blocked out the sun and cast shadows across the entire city. People looked up in terror as the crystal vessels came down like falling stars. The ground shook as the massive ships used their anti-gravity systems to hover just above the Earth. Zeth Kalan emerged from his command ship wearing the most advanced environmental suit the Vexthara had ever built. The suit was made of the same crystal material as the ships and had systems that were supposed to protect him from any planetary environment. The war commander was confident that his technology would overcome the problems that had defeated the earlier ground teams. But Earth's gravity hit Zeth Kalan like a physical blow. The environmental suit was heavy and awkward and made every movement difficult. The war commander had spent his entire life in the zero gravity of space and had never experienced anything like this. He stumbled as he tried to walk and had to use his staff to keep from falling. The other Vexthara warriors were having even worse problems. Their environmental suits were failing in Earth's thick atmosphere, and many aliens were already getting sick. The suits had been designed for the vacuum of space and could not handle the pressure and humidity of Earth's air. Several warriors collapsed before they could even leave their ship's commander. Jake Morrison was leading the human ground forces that had been sent to stop the alien invasion. He watched from a safe distance as the Vextharas struggled with their equipment. The aliens were clearly in trouble, but they still had superior weapons and technology. Jake knew that the coming battle would determine the fate of humanity. Vexthara tried to set up their most powerful weapon near the landing site. It was a gravity manipulator that could create artificial gravity fields strong enough to crush spacecraft. The weapon had been used to destroy entire fleets in space battles. Zethkalen ordered his warriors to activate the device and use it to flatten the surrounding human forces. But the gravity manipulator was not designed to work on a planet with its own gravity field. When the aliens activated the device, it created a feedback loop with Earth's natural gravity. The artificial gravity field became unstable and began to fluctuate wildly. The ground around the weapon began to crack and shake as the gravity fields interfered with each other. Dr. Maria Santos was monitoring the alien weapon from her mobile laboratory. She realized what was happening and quickly contacted the military commanders. The alien weapon was going to destroy itself and take the entire landing site with it. The feedback loop was getting stronger and would soon reach critical levels. The gravity manipulator exploded with tremendous force. The blast created a crater half a mile wide and destroyed most of the alien landing site. Dozens of Vexthara ships were caught in the explosion and crashed to the ground. The surviving aliens were trapped in the wreckage and could not escape. Because their environmental suits were damaged, War Commander Zethkalen survived the explosion, but his command ship was destroyed. He was trapped on Earth's surface with a few hundred warriors and no way to return to orbit. The environmental suits were failing, and the aliens were getting weaker by the hour. The War Commander realized that he had made a terrible mistake by coming down to this hostile world. Private Ryan Cole led a squad of human soldiers toward the crashed alien ships. The soldiers moved easily in Earth's gravity, while the aliens struggled to walk. Human weapons that would have been useless in space were very effective against the clumsy aliens. The environmental suits were easily damaged, and the aliens inside were helpless once their suits failed. The human soldiers quickly learned that the aliens were not adapted for ground combat. The Vexthara had built their entire military system around space battles and orbital bombardments. They had never learned how to fight on planetary surfaces, and their tactics were completely wrong for this environment. The aliens moved slowly and could not coordinate their attacks properly. Sergeant Linda Hayes discovered that the alien energy weapons were also failing in Earth's atmosphere. The weapons had been designed to work in the vacuum of space, where there was no air to interfere with the energy beams. In Earth's thick atmosphere, the weapons overheated quickly and became unreliable. Many of the alien weapons stopped working completely after just a few shots. The battle turned into a rout as more human forces arrived. The aliens were trapped in their damaged ships and could not move effectively. Human soldiers surrounded the crash sites and began capturing aliens whose environmental suits had failed. The mighty Vexthara warriors were reduced to helpless prisoners who could barely breathe without assistance. Colonel Alex Turner coordinated the human attacks and realized that the aliens were psychologically broken as well as physically defeated. The Vexthara had never experienced defeat before, and they did not know how to handle it. Many aliens simply gave up fighting and waited to be captured. Their entire understanding of warfare had been based on technological superiority, and they had no idea how to fight without it. War Commander Zeth Kalen found himself facing Commander Jake Morrison in single combat. The alien leader was still wearing his damaged environmental suit and could barely stand upright. Jake carried a simple projectile weapon and moved easily in the gravity that was crushing his enemy. The war commander tried to use his energy staff, but the weapon failed in Earth's atmosphere. The fight between the two commanders was symbolic of the entire battle. Zeth Kalen had been unbeatable in space, but was helpless on Earth's surface. Jake was an ordinary human with basic weapons, but he was fighting in his natural environment. The battle was over quickly as the alien commander collapsed from exhaustion and the failure of his environmental suit. The news of the victory spread quickly across Earth and to the human colonies. The mighty Vexthara had been defeated by simple human soldiers using basic weapons. The aliens who had seemed like gods in space were revealed to be vulnerable when forced to fight on planetary surfaces. Humanity had found a way to turn their perceived weakness into their greatest strength. The surviving aliens were captured and their ships were secured by human forces. The Vexthara fleet in orbit was in chaos as they tried to understand what had happened to their ground forces. The aliens had never imagined that they could be defeated by a primitive species like humanity. The balance of power in the galaxy had suddenly shifted, and the aliens were learning what it meant to be afraid. The final battle took place in the ruins of the alien base near New York. War Commander Zeth Kalen lay trapped under a piece of his destroyed command ship. His crystalline armor was cracked and failing, and he could barely breathe through his damaged environmental suit. The mighty alien warrior who had conquered star systems was now helpless on the surface of a primitive world. Commander Jake Morrison approached the trapped alien leader carefully. He carried a simple human weapon, but he knew that even a wounded Vexthara could be dangerous. Jake had seen what the aliens could do in space, and he respected their technology, even though it was failing them now. The confrontation between the two commanders would determine more than just the fate of the battle. Zeth Kalen tried to stand up, but Earth's gravity was too much for his damaged suit. The alien had spent his entire life in the zero gravity of space, and his body was not designed for planetary environments. Every movement was agony, and the thick atmosphere was poisoning him slowly. The war commander realized that he was dying, and there was nothing his advanced technology could do to save him. Jake looked down at the alien leader and felt a mixture of pity and respect. This creature had been a god among the stars, but was now just another living being struggling to survive. The human commander understood that the battle was already over, but the alien needed to accept defeat with dignity. Jake offered his hand to help the alien stand up for their final confrontation. The alien took Jake's hand and struggled to his feet. The environmental suit was making horrible noises as its systems failed one by one. Zeth Kalen raised his energy staff with shaking hands and tried to activate its weapon systems. The staff flickered weakly and then died completely. The alien dropped the useless weapon and stared at Jake with eyes that showed defeat for the first time. Jake pointed his simple projectile weapon at the alien, but did not fire. The battle was over, and there was no need for more killing. The human commander spoke to the alien in a calm voice and offered him the chance to surrender. Zeth Kalen looked around at the ruins of his mighty invasion force and realized that he had no choice. The Vexthara had been utterly defeated. The alien commander tried to speak, but his voice translator was damaged. He managed to say a few words in broken English before his suit's power systems failed completely. Zeth Kalen said that he had never imagined that humans could be so dangerous. The aliens had thought they were conquering a primitive species, but they had walked into a trap that had destroyed their most powerful military force. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the news of the alien commander's surrender while she was coordinating the cleanup operations. The human forces had captured hundreds of aliens and secured dozens of crashed ships. The technology on the alien vessels was incredibly advanced, but it was all designed for space environments. On Earth's surface, the amazing machines were just expensive junk. The Vexthara fleet in orbit was in complete panic. The ship commanders were receiving reports of the disaster on the planet's surface, but they could not believe what they were hearing. Their most powerful military force had been destroyed by humans using primitive weapons. The aliens had never experienced anything like this in their long history of conquest. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh was examining the captured alien technology with a team of human scientists. The Vexthara ships were marvels of engineering, but they had critical weaknesses that the aliens had never considered. The ships were built for the vacuum of space and could not function properly in planetary atmospheres. The environmental systems were failing everywhere. The alien ships that had landed on Earth were now trapped. The anti-gravity systems that had brought them down were damaged and could not lift the heavy vessels back into space. The ships were designed to be serviced in zero-gravity orbital facilities and could not be repaired on a planetary surface. The mighty Vexthara fleet was grounded and helpless. Danny and his team began sabotaging the alien ships to make sure they could never be used again. The human engineers were amazed by the advanced technology, but they also saw how fragile it was. The aliens had built their entire civilization around the idea that they would never have to fight on planetary surfaces. This assumption had been their greatest weakness. Dr. Simon Blake was documenting everything that had happened during the invasion. The scientists realized that this battle would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Vexthara had been one of the most feared races in known space, but they had been defeated by humans who were barely capable of interstellar travel. The news would spread to every corner of the galaxy. The alien fleet commanders finally accepted that their ground forces were lost. The ship commanders sent a message to Earth asking for permission to retrieve their surviving warriors. The proud Vexthara were now begging for mercy from the humans they had tried to conquer. The roles had been completely reversed in just a few days. President Lisa Carter responded to the alien request with conditions that would have been impossible before the battle. The Vexthara would have to withdraw from all human territory and promise never to return. They would also have to share information about other alien races that might threaten humanity. The aliens had no choice but to agree to these demands. The withdrawal of the Vexthara fleet was a humiliating defeat for the alien empire. The ships that had come to conquer Earth were now fleeing as fast as they could travel. The news of their defeat would reach every corner of the galaxy within months. The mighty Vexthara had learned what it meant to be afraid of another species. Admiral Sullivan sent a message to all human colonies and ships throughout space. The message was simple, but it would be remembered for generations. Earth was now off limits to any alien species that wanted to conquer humanity. Any aliens who wanted to fight humans would have to come down to planetary surfaces where humans had the advantage. The battle had taught humanity an important lesson about their place in the galaxy. Humans might never be able to match alien technology in space, but they had their own advantages. Earth's heavy gravity and thick atmosphere were natural weapons that could defeat even the most advanced alien technology. The planet that had given birth to humanity was also their greatest fortress. Jake Morrison stood in the ruins of the alien base and watched the last Vexthara ships disappear into space. The human commander knew that this victory would not be the end of humanity's struggles. There were other alien races out there, and some of them might be even more dangerous than the Vexthara. But humans had learned something important about themselves during this battle. The final scene showed Dr. Blake writing his report about the invasion. He noted that the Vexthara had made a critical mistake by underestimating their enemies. The aliens had been so focused on their technological superiority that they had forgotten about the importance of environmental adaptation. They had been invincible in space, but powerless on Earth. The report concluded with a new understanding of humanity's role in the galaxy. Humans were not the most advanced species, but they were the most adaptable. They could survive and fight in environments that would kill other races. The galaxy had learned a new lesson about the species from the small blue planet. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from knowing how to use your natural advantages. The story ended with a message that would spread throughout the galaxy. The Vexthara had been gods among the stars, but they had learned to fear the humans, who ruled the planetary surfaces. The day of human conquest had not yet come, but the day of human respect had arrived. No alien race would ever again make the mistake of underestimating the species that had turned their greatest weakness into their most powerful weapon.